Story 1. The Mile Marker That Didn't Exist. Marcus Chen had been driving long-haul routes for 18 years, and he prided himself on knowing every stretch of Interstate 80 between Omaha and Salt Lake City like the back of his hand. He'd driven it in every season, every weather condition, and at every hour of the day and night. His Peterbilt 579 was equipped with the latest GPS technology, but Marcus rarely needed it for this route. He knew every rest stop, every fuel station, every steep grade and dangerous curve by heart. That's why what happened on the night of October 14th, 2019, shook him so deeply that he still can't talk about it without his hands trembling. The run started normally enough. Marcus left Omaha at 9 p.m. with a load of electronics, bound for a distribution center in West Sacramento. The weather was clear, temperature hovering around 45 degrees, and traffic was light for a Thursday night. He'd made good time through Nebraska, crossed into Wyoming just after midnight, and was making his usual fuel stop in Rawlins when he noticed something odd. The attendant at the truck stop, a kid who couldn't have been more than 22, looked at him strangely when Marcus mentioned he was planning to push through to Rock Springs before taking his mandatory rest break. "You be careful out there tonight," the kid said, his voice carrying an edge that Marcus couldn't quite identify. "Some weird stuff's been happening on that stretch lately." Marcus had laughed it off. In 18 years, he'd heard every superstition, every ghost story, every urban legend about haunted highways. He'd driven through alleged phantom zones, past supposedly cursed mile markers, and along roads where hitchhikers were said to vanish into thin air. None of it had ever amounted to anything more than tired drivers, optical illusions, and overactive imaginations. He thanked the kid, topped off his tank, grabbed a coffee, and got back on the road. The stretch of I-80 between Rawlins and Rock Springs is desolate even by Wyoming standards. For nearly 100 miles, there's nothing but scrubland, distant mountains, and the occasional antelope. Cell service is spotty at best, and the darkness out there is absolute. No light pollution, no towns, nothing but your headlights and the stars. Marcus had driven it hundreds of times and never felt uncomfortable. But that night, about 40 miles west of Rawlins, something changed. He first noticed it at mile marker 187. The green sign appeared in his headlights exactly as it should, but something about it seemed off. Marcus couldn't put his finger on what bothered him until he was past it and glancing in his side mirror. The reflective lettering seemed to shimmer strangely, almost like it was moving. He shook his head, attributing it to fatigue, and checked his watch. It was 1:47 a.m. He'd been on the road for nearly 5 hours and felt wide awake. 5 minutes later, he passed mile marker 188, then 189. Everything normal. His CB radio crackled occasionally with distant trucker chatter, mostly guys complaining about traffic backups near Cheyenne or discussing the best diners in Little America. Marcus was reaching for his coffee when he saw the hitchhiker. The figure stood just beyond mile marker 190, partially illuminated by Marcus's headlights. It was a man, average height, wearing what looked like a dark coat or jacket. His thumb was out, the universal sign for needing a ride. Marcus's first instinct was to ignore him. He'd stopped picking up hitchhikers years ago after a close call with a tweaker near Reno, who'd pulled a knife and demanded money. But something about this figure made him slow down slightly. The man wasn't moving. He stood perfectly still, thumb extended, facing the road. His other arm hung at his side, and even from a distance, Marcus could see that something was wrong with his posture. Too rigid, too straight. Marcus passed him doing about 65, and as his trailer cleared the spot, he glanced in his side mirror to get another look. The figure was gone. completely vanished. The shoulder of the highway was empty, the scrubland beyond illuminated by his taillights, showing nothing but brush and rocks. No one could have moved that fast, especially not away from the road and out of sight. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. He picked up his CB radio microphone. "This is Freight Dog eastbound at mile 190 on I-80. Anyone else out here seeing weird stuff tonight?" Static answered him. He tried again. More static. He checked his radio. It was on, the power light glowing green, but no one was responding. The distant chatter he'd been hearing just minutes ago had completely stopped. Mile marker 191 appeared, then 192. Marcus kept checking his mirrors, but the road behind him remained empty. His GPS showed him exactly where he should be, moving along I-80 at 68 miles per hour. Everything was normal except for the complete silence on the CB and the lingering image of that impossibly still figure. At mile marker 195, the hitchhiker was there again. This time, Marcus saw him from much farther away, standing in the same position, thumb out, face turned toward the approaching truck. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. This wasn't possible. The figure had been at mile marker 190 just minutes ago. Even if it had been a different person, who would be hitchhiking out here at 2 a.m? And why would they be standing in exactly the same position, with exactly the same posture? As Marcus approached, he slowed down more this time, trying to get a better look at the man's face. The headlights illuminated him clearly for just a moment. What Marcus saw made his blood run cold. The man had no face. Where his features should have been, there was just smooth, blank skin, like an unfinished mannequin. The thumb was still extended, the posture still impossibly rigid, but there were no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just blank, pale skin. Marcus's foot slammed on the accelerator, and his rig lurched forward. He didn't look in the mirror this time. He grabbed his cell phone with shaking hands, but there was no signal. The GPS was still working, still showing him on I-80. But now it was showing something else too. According to the display, he was at mile marker 193, but he'd just passed 195. He knew he had. He'd seen the sign clearly. The next mile marker he passed was 194, then 195 again, then 196. But something was terribly wrong with the sequence. Mile marker 197 appeared, but instead of the usual green reflective sign, this one was faded, the numbers barely visible. And standing next to it was another figure, then another at 198, and another at 199. Each one identical. Each one with that extended thumb, that rigid posture, that horrible blank face. Marcus was doing 80 now, his engine roaring, his hands gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles had gone white. The figures kept appearing, one at every mile marker, always on the right side of the road, always in the same position. His GPS had stopped making sense entirely. The numbers jumped around randomly. 201, 197, 203, 195, 205, 190. The mile markers he was actually passing seemed to follow some logic of their own, counting up normally, but there were too many of them. He'd been driving for what felt like 20 minutes since this nightmare began, but according to his odometer, he'd only covered 7 miles. Then the figures started to change. At mile marker 208, or maybe it was 202, or 195 again, Marcus couldn't tell anymore. The hitchhiker's head turned to follow his truck as he passed. The blank face tracked him, that featureless surface somehow watching him despite having no eyes. The next figure's arm moved, the thumb curling down, then the whole hand making a gesture Marcus didn't understand. Pointing, beckoning, warning. Marcus's CB suddenly erupted with sound, but it wasn't the normal chatter of truckers. It was a voice, monotone and emotionless, repeating the same phrase over and over. Stop at 190. Stop at 190. Stop at 190. He fumbled with the radio, trying to turn it off, but the volume knob did nothing. The voice continued, unchanging in pitch or rhythm. Stop at 190. Stop at 190. He saw a sign ahead that wasn't a mile marker. A green road sign indicating an exit. Wamsota, it said, with an arrow pointing right. Marcus knew that exit. It was real. It existed. He'd taken it before when he needed to use the rest area there. He jerked his wheel right, taking the exit at a speed that made his trailer swing dangerously. The CB went silent the moment his tires left the interstate. The exit ramp curved away into darkness, and Marcus followed it, not caring where it led as long as it was away from those impossible figures. His headlights caught a small building ahead, a closed gas station with a single security light illuminating a cracked parking lot. He pulled in and killed the engine, his whole body shaking. For 10 minutes, Marcus sat in his cab, lights off, breathing hard. His phone suddenly chimed. Signal was back. He checked the time. 2:03 a.m. Only 16 minutes had passed since he'd seen the first hitchhiker at mile marker 190. Impossible. It had felt like an hour. His GPS showed him in Wamsutta exactly where he should be. According to his trip computer, he'd driven 38 miles since Rawlins. The math worked out. Everything was normal. But Marcus knew what he'd seen. He called his dispatcher, told him he was taking his rest break early, that he wasn't feeling well. He didn't mention the hitchhikers or the mile markers or the voice on the CB. He slept in his cab until sunrise. And when he got back on I-80 heading west, everything was normal. The mile markers counted up correctly. The CB crackled with regular traffic. There were no figures standing on the shoulder. Marcus never drove that stretch of road at night again. He rearranged his entire schedule, taking different routes, timing his trips to ensure he'd always pass through that section during daylight hours. He asked other drivers about it cautiously, never revealing what he'd experienced, just asking if they'd ever seen anything strange between Rawlins and Rock Springs. Most laughed it off. But 2 drivers went quiet, their eyes shifting away, and one old-timer named Dale pulled him aside at a truck stop in Laramie and said 5 words that Marcus will never forget. "You stopped before 190, right?" Marcus never asked what would have happened if he'd stopped at mile marker 190. He didn't want to know. Some questions, he decided, are better left unanswered. But every time he passes that stretch during the day, he counts the mile markers carefully. And he's never been able to shake the feeling that somewhere, in some version of that highway that exists just slightly out of phase with our own, those figures are still standing there, thumbs out, waiting for someone to stop. Story 2. The Woman in the White Sedan. Rachel Morrison had been driving for Uber in the Phoenix metro area for 3 years when she decided to expand into late-night airport runs. The money was better, and she'd always been a night owl anyway. At 34, recently divorced and supporting 2 kids who lived with their father during the week, she needed every dollar she could get. The overnight shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. paid surge pricing almost continuously, especially on weekends when people were catching red-eye flights or coming home from Vegas. The night of March 8th, 2021, started like any other Saturday night. Rachel picked up her first fare at 10:30, a businesswoman heading to Sky Harbor for a midnight flight to Chicago. Easy money. She followed it with a couple picking up their daughter from Terminal 4, then a solo traveler heading to a hotel in Tempe. By 2 a.m., she'd made decent money and was considering calling it a night when her app pinged with a new request. The pickup location was on a residential street in Ahwatukee, a suburban area in South Phoenix. The destination was also in Ahwatukee, only about 3 miles away. Quick trip, easy money. Rachel accepted. The address led her to a dark street lined with modest ranch-style homes. Most houses were dark, residents long asleep. Rachel pulled up to the specified address and checked her app. The passenger's name was listed as Sarah. No last name, no photo, which wasn't unusual for people concerned about privacy. Rachel waited, her car idling, her doors locked as per her standard safety procedure. After about 30 seconds, her phone buzzed with a text through the app. "I'm here. White sedan across the street." Rachel looked up. Across the street, partially obscured by a large mesquite tree, was a white sedan. It looked like a Toyota Camry, maybe 10 years old, parked at the curb. Rachel couldn't see anyone inside from this angle, but the text had come from her passenger. She typed back, "I can pick you up from there. I'm in the gray Honda CR-V." The response came immediately. "Need you to get something from my car first. Keys are under the mat. Passenger side, back seat." Rachel felt her first twinge of unease. This was weird. Passengers didn't usually ask her to retrieve things from their vehicles, but she'd had strange requests before. Once, a guy had asked her to stop at 3 different ATMs because he'd forgotten his wallet. Another time, a woman had insisted on sitting in the back seat with her emotional support peacock. People were weird, especially at 2 a.m. She texted back, "What do you need me to get?" "Small black bag. It's important. I hurt my leg. Can't walk to get it. Please." The please made Rachel hesitate. Maybe the passenger really was injured. That would explain why she needed a ride for such a short distance. And if she was hurt, Rachel couldn't just leave her stranded. Against her better judgment, Rachel unlocked her doors and stepped out of her CR-V. The night was cool, probably around 60 degrees, with a slight breeze that rustled the palm fronds lining the street. Somewhere a dog barked, then fell silent. Rachel's footsteps seemed loud on the asphalt as she crossed the empty street. The white sedan sat dark and silent under the mesquite tree's shadow. As Rachel got closer, she could see that the windows were tinted, darker than Arizona's legal limit. She couldn't see inside at all. She circled around to the passenger side and crouched down, feeling under the front floor mat. Her fingers found a key fob. "Found it," she called out, assuming the passenger could hear her. No response. Rachel straightened up and pressed the unlock button. The sedan's locks clicked open with a soft thunk. She opened the rear passenger door and leaned in. The interior smelled strange, like old pennies and something sweet that Rachel couldn't identify. On the back seat was indeed a small black bag, about the size of a gym bag. Rachel reached for it, and her hand froze. There was something else in the car. In the driver's seat, barely visible in the darkness, was a shape. Rachel's eyes adjusted, and she realized she was looking at a person sitting perfectly still behind the wheel. The figure wore dark clothing and hadn't moved at all, hadn't acknowledged Rachel's presence. "Sarah?" Rachel said, her voice coming out higher than normal. "Is that you?" The figure didn't respond, didn't turn its head, didn't move at all. Rachel backed out of the car quickly, her heart suddenly pounding. This was wrong. This was very wrong. She looked down at her phone, about to text through the app, when she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The Uber app showed her current status, waiting for passenger. But underneath, it showed the passenger's location. According to the app, Sarah was inside Rachel's CR-V. Rachel spun around. Across the street, her CR-V sat where she'd left it, doors still unlocked, interior lights off. She couldn't see anyone inside from this angle, but the app insisted someone was there. Her mind raced. This was a setup, Had to be. Someone was trying to rob her, or worse. She needed to get back to her car and get out of here. She started walking quickly back across the street, keeping her eyes on her vehicle. As she got closer, she could see through the windshield more clearly. The driver's seat was empty. The passenger seat was empty. But her phone still showed the passenger's location as inside her car. Rachel reached for the driver's door handle and froze. In the back seat, visible now through the rear window, was a woman. She sat perfectly still in the center of the back seat, hands folded in her lap, face pointed straight ahead. She wore a white dress or gown, and even in the darkness, Rachel could see that her skin was very pale. "What the hell?" Rachel whispered. She hadn't unlocked the back doors. They were child-locked, couldn't be opened from inside. There was no way someone could have gotten into her back seat without her seeing them. Her phone buzzed. A new text through the app. "Did you get my bag?" Rachel looked at the white sedan across the street, then at the woman in her back seat, then at her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely type. "Who are you?" The response came instantly. "Your passenger. Did you get my bag? I need it." "How did you get in my car?" "I've been waiting. You took too long. Did you get my bag?" Rachel's finger hovered over the cancel trip button in her app. She should cancel, get in her car, drive away. But the woman was in her back seat. What if she wouldn't leave? What if she became violent? Rachel looked around desperately for help, but the street remained empty and silent. She forced herself to think rationally. The woman wasn't doing anything threatening. She was just sitting there. Maybe this was some kind of weird misunderstanding. Maybe the woman was mentally ill and confused. Rachel had dealt with difficult passengers before. She could handle this. "I need you to get out of my car," Rachel said, loud enough to be heard through the window. The figure in the back seat didn't respond, didn't move. Rachel tried the driver's door, locked, but she hadn't locked it. She distinctly remembered not locking it because she was only going to be gone for a minute. She pressed the unlock button on her key fob. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. Still nothing. Her phone buzzed again. "The bag. Please. It's important." Rachel looked at the white sedan. The figure in the driver's seat still hadn't moved. She looked at her CRV. The woman in the back seat sat like a statue, and her phone kept showing the passenger's location as inside her vehicle, even though logic said that was impossible. A new thought occurred to Rachel, more disturbing than the rest. She opened her Uber app's trip details. The passenger's profile was blank. No photo, no name beyond Sarah, no ratings from previous drivers, no history. The account had been created today. The phone number shown was just a string of zeros. "This isn't real," Rachel said aloud, trying to convince herself. "This can't be real." Her car's interior lights suddenly came on, flooding the back seat with illumination. The woman sitting there turned her head slowly to look at Rachel through the window. What Rachel saw made her drop her phone. The woman's face was wrong. Her eyes were too large, taking up nearly half her face, and they were completely black. No whites, no iris, no pupil, just solid black. Her mouth was closed, but it was too wide, stretching almost from ear to ear. And her skin wasn't just pale, it was translucent. Rachel could see the faint outline of the headrest through the woman's face. The figure's mouth opened, impossibly wide, and Rachel could see that her teeth were all pointed, like a shark's. The woman reached forward, her hand pressing against the window between them, and Rachel saw that her fingers were too long, each one having too many joints. Rachel ran. She sprinted down the street, her keys still in her hand, her phone somewhere on the ground behind her. She ran past dark houses, past empty cars, past shadowy yards. Behind her, she heard a car door open, then another. Footsteps on pavement, not running, walking, following her with measured, patient steps. She pounded on the door of the nearest house, screaming for help. Lights came on. A man's voice shouted something from inside. The door opened and Rachel practically fell into the home of a retired couple, who called 911, while Rachel babbled about the woman with the black eyes and the impossible passenger. The police arrived 12 minutes later. Rachel led them back to where she'd left her CRV, the retired man accompanying them for her safety. The street was exactly as she'd left it, quiet and dark. Her CRV sat at the curb, doors closed, interior dark. Her phone lay on the asphalt where she'd dropped it, screen cracked, but still functioning. The white sedan was gone. The police searched the area and found nothing. They checked Rachel's car thoroughly, empty. No signs of forced entry, no evidence anyone had been inside. The locks worked perfectly. Rachel's Uber app showed one cancelled trip, the one from Sarah. But when the officers tried to get more information, they found that the account had been deleted. The phone number was invalid. The pickup and drop-off addresses were real, but belonged to homes where the residents had been asleep all night and knew nothing about any Uber request. One officer took Rachel aside while his partner finished photographing her vehicle. "Look," he said quietly, "between you and me, you're the fourth person this month to report something like this. Different areas of the city, but always the same basic story. Uber or Lyft driver gets a strange request, sees someone or something that shouldn't be there. White car seems to be a common element." "What is it?" Rachel asked. "What's happening?" The officer shook his head. "I don't know. Could be some kind of coordinated hoax. Could be something else. But I'll tell you what I tell everyone. Don't drive late nights alone anymore. And if you do, don't accept rides from new accounts with no history." Rachel never drove for Uber again. She got a day job at a call center, took the pay cut, rearranged her budget. The money wasn't as good, but she could sleep at night. Most nights, anyway. Sometimes she still wakes up remembering those black eyes, that too wide mouth, those impossible fingers pressed against her window. And she wonders about the bag, the small black bag she never retrieved from the white sedan. She wonders what was inside it, what was so important that something wearing a woman's face would manifest in reality to get it back. She doesn't drive through Ahwatukee anymore. She takes the long way around, even though it adds 20 minutes to her route. Because sometimes, late at night when the streets are empty, she sees white sedans parked in shadows, and she knows, with absolute certainty, that something is sitting in the driver's seat, waiting patiently for the next person to accept the ride request. Story 3. The repeating truck stop. James Whitaker had been an independent contractor, hauling refrigerated goods across the southern states for 11 years. At 47, he knew every reliable fuel stop, every decent diner, and every mechanic worth trusting between El Paso and Jacksonville. His setup was simple but effective. A 2016 Kenworth T680, pulling a 53-foot refrigerated trailer, CB radio, satellite GPS, and a smartphone with 3 different trucker apps for finding fuel prices, parking availability, and weather conditions. He ran clean, maintained his equipment, and prided himself on never missing a delivery window. On November 22, 2020, James was hauling a load of frozen seafood from Brownsville, Texas, to Atlanta, Georgia. He'd started the run at 6 p.m. after picking up the trailer, and by 11 p.m., he was well into Louisiana, making good time on Interstate 10. The weather was clear, temperature in the low 60s, and traffic was light. James was planning to fuel up in Lafayette and grab some food before pushing onto Mississippi for his mandatory rest break. His GPS indicated a flying J-truck stop was coming up in 8 miles. James had stopped there before. It was a good facility, always clean, with decent hot food and usually plenty of parking. But as he approached the exit, something felt off. The sign marking the exit looked wrong somehow, faded in a way he didn't remember. Still, the GPS was clear, and the exit number matched. He took the off-ramp. The truck stop appeared exactly where it should be, just off the highway, its tall sign visible from the interstate. But the parking lot was completely empty. No trucks, no cars, nothing. The building lights were on, but the place looked deserted. James checked his watch. 11:43 p.m. Too early for the overnight lull. Too late for everyone to be on the road. There should have been at least a dozen trucks parked here. He pulled up to the fuel pumps anyway. His tank was at a quarter, and he didn't want to risk running low. The diesel pumps looked normal enough, though the price display showed an amount that seemed off. $2.19 per gallon. That was at least $1 less than current prices. James figured the display was broken, and the real price would show up when he swiped his card. He stepped out of his cab into the cool night air. The truck stop was eerily quiet. No hum of idling trucks, no distant conversation from other drivers, no music from someone's radio. Just silence and the buzz of the overhead lights. James swiped his fuel card at the pump. The reader beeped, and the display lit up. Approved. Please begin fueling. As he pulled the nozzle from its cradle and began filling his tank, James noticed something strange. The building's windows were lit, but he couldn't see anyone moving inside. The convenience store appeared fully stocked. The lights in the restaurant section were on, but there were no employees visible. No one at the registers, no one at the food counter, nothing. The pump clicked off automatically when his tank was full. James replaced the nozzle and checked the receipt printout. It showed $2.19 per gallon as promised, and the total came to $147.89 for 67.5 gallons. Impossibly cheap. James pulled out his phone to check current fuel prices in the area. His phone showed no signal. Not just low signal, but no bars at all. The GPS app wouldn't load, and his trucker apps all showed connection errors. Movement in the corner of his vision made him turn. A man was walking across the parking lot toward him. He wore a denim jacket and a cap, looked to be in his 60s, and walked with the distinctive rolling gait of someone who'd spent decades in a truck cab. He waved at James in the familiar way. Truckers greeted each other. "Hell of a night," the man called out as he approached. "Quiet one," James agreed, relaxing slightly. Maybe the place wasn't as deserted as it seemed. The man stopped about 10 feet away and looked up at James's Kenworth. "Nice rig. New. 2016. Got it with about 100,000 on the odometer. Runs great." The man nodded appreciatively. "Bet it does. They don't make 'em like they used to, but that's a good year. I'm running a 14 International. Over there." He pointed toward the far end of the parking lot. James looked. The parking lot was still empty. No International, no trucks at all, except his own Kenworth. "Must be the lighting," the man said, noticing James's confusion. "Plays tricks on your eyes out here. You heading east?" "Atlanta," James confirmed, now feeling uneasy again. "Long haul. You better get some food in you. Restaurant's got good chicken fried steak. Best on this stretch of I-10. James glanced at the building again. Still no visible employees. "Place looks closed." "Nah, just quiet tonight. Go on in. Betty's working the counter. Tell her Frank sent you. She'll fix you up right." The man named Frank touched the brim of his cap in a casual salute and walked away, heading toward the empty part of the parking lot where his truck supposedly sat. James watched him go, and within seconds, the man simply wasn't there anymore. He didn't disappear dramatically or fade away. He was just gone, as if he'd stepped through an invisible door. Every instinct James had was screaming at him to get back in his truck and leave. But he was hungry. His logbook showed he was due for a break. And despite the weirdness, nothing had actually threatened him. Maybe this was just some bizarre coincidence. Maybe his phone service was just temporarily down. Maybe the parking lot was empty because everyone had left before he arrived. There were rational explanations for everything he'd seen. He walked toward the building entrance, gravel crunching under his boots. The door opened easily, triggering an electronic chime. Inside, the convenience store looked perfectly normal. Fully stocked shelves, clean floors, bright fluorescent lighting. The hot food counter in the back showed trays of fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and various sides under heat lamps. Everything looked fresh. "Hello?" James called out. His voice echoed slightly. No response. He walked down an aisle, his unease growing. The products on the shelves were familiar brands, but something was wrong with them. The packaging looked slightly off, like old versions he vaguely remembered from years ago. A Coca-Cola display showed a logo design James hadn't seen since the early 2000s. A rack of candy bars had wrappers in styles that seemed dated. Behind the counter, a small TV was on, showing what looked like a local news broadcast. James moved closer to see it better. The broadcast showed a weather report for Louisiana, but the date stamp in the corner read November 22nd, 2003. 17 years ago. James backed away from the counter, his heart hammering. This wasn't right. None of this was right. He needed to leave, needed to get back to his truck and get out of here. He turned toward the door. A woman stood blocking his path. She wore a waitress uniform, the kind with the frilly apron and name tag. The name tag read Betty. She smiled at him, but her eyes were wrong. Too glassy, too fixed. "You must be hungry," Betty said. Her voice sounded flat, like she was reading from a script. "Frank said you'd be stopping by. The chicken fried steak is very good tonight." "I need to go," James said, trying to step around her. Betty didn't move. "You just got here. You need to eat. You need to rest. Everyone who stops here needs to rest. My truck's right outside. I'm leaving." "Everyone says that." Betty's smile didn't waver. "But the road is so long, and you're so tired. Why don't you stay? We have rooms, clean rooms, quiet. You could rest for just a little while." James pushed past her, more roughly than he intended. She didn't resist, just turned to watch him go, that fixed smile never changing. He hit the door at a near run, the chime sounding again as he burst out into the parking lot. His truck was gone. James stood frozen, staring at the empty parking lot. His Kenworth T680, with its load of frozen seafood worth over $100,000, had vanished. The spot where he'd parked at the fuel pumps was empty. No tire marks, no oil stains, nothing to indicate a truck had ever been there. He spun around, disoriented. The truck stop building sat there, unchanged. Through the windows, he could see Betty standing inside, watching him. She raised one hand in a slow wave. James ran. He sprinted toward the exit road, toward the interstate, his boots pounding on asphalt. Behind him, he heard the electronic chime of the door opening. Footsteps followed him, not running, walking, patient and steady. The access road stretched ahead of him, and he could see the interstate in the distance, occasional headlights passing by. He ran harder, his lungs burning. The footsteps behind him kept pace, never getting closer, never falling behind, just maintaining the same steady distance. He reached the interstate and didn't slow down, running along the shoulder, waving his arms at passing vehicles. A sedan swerved slightly but didn't stop. A pickup truck's horn blared as it passed. No one stopped. Why would they? A wild-eyed man running along the interstate at midnight didn't inspire people to pull over and help. Finally, a set of headlights slowed. A semi, pulling what looked like a flatbed trailer, eased onto the shoulder ahead of him. James ran to the passenger side as the door opened. "You okay, buddy?" the driver called down. He was a younger guy, maybe 30, with a concerned expression. "I need help," James gasped out. "My truck. It's gone. And there's this place." "Get in," the driver said. "You look like hell." James climbed up into the cab, collapsing into the passenger seat. The driver pulled back onto the interstate, accelerating smoothly. "What happened?" the driver asked. James tried to explain, the words tumbling out in a confused rush. The empty truck stop, the wrong fuel prices, the man who disappeared, Betty the waitress, his vanishing truck. It sounded insane even to his own ears. The driver listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When James finished, the driver was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What exit was it?" "I don't know. The GPS said Flying J, about 8 miles past Lafayette." "There's no Flying J there," the driver said quietly. "Closest one is 20 miles east. I know because I fuel there all the time." James pulled out his phone. Still no signal. "Can I use your phone? I need to call the police, report my truck stolen." The driver handed him a phone without a word. James dialed 911, and when the operator answered, he tried to report his stolen truck. The operator asked for his location. James looked at the driver, who pointed to an upcoming mile marker. "Mile marker 103 on I-10 eastbound," James said. There was a pause on the line. Then the operator said, "Sir, can you describe your truck?" James described his Kenworth, gave the plate number, the VIN he'd memorized, the trailer number. Another pause. "Sir, I need you to stay calm. I'm showing that vehicle is currently eastbound on I-10, approximately mile marker 115. It's transmitting normal GPS data and hasn't been reported stolen." "That's impossible," James said. "I'm not in my truck. I'm in..." He looked at the driver. "What's your name?" "Michael," the driver said. "I'm in Michael's truck, a flatbed semi. We're at mile marker 103. "Sir, the GPS data shows you're in your truck, traveling at 68 miles per hour. Is this some kind of prank call?" James looked at the phone in his hand, then at Michael, then out at the highway ahead. In the distance, he could see tail lights. As they got closer, James recognized the distinctive light pattern on his trailer. His Kenworth T680, pulling his refrigerated load, driving normally down the highway. "What the hell?" James whispered. Michael accelerated, pulling alongside the Kenworth. James stared across at his own truck. The cab lights were off, but in the darkness, he could just make out a figure in the driver's seat. As they pulled even, the figure turned to look at them. It was James, his own face, his own cap, his own jacket. The other James smiled and gave a friendly wave, the kind truckers give each other on the highway. Then the Kenworth accelerated, pulling ahead and disappearing into the night. Michael slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder, his hands shaking. He looked at James, and James saw fear in the younger man's eyes. "What the fuck was that?" "I don't know," James said. They sat there for 10 minutes, neither speaking, watching the highway traffic pass. Finally, Michael said, "This has happened before. Not to me, but I've heard stories. Other drivers talk about it. Stops that aren't there. Copies of themselves driving their own trucks. Most people don't believe it. But I believe you." James's phone suddenly chimed. Signal was back. He had a text message from his dispatcher. "Running ahead of schedule, ETA Atlanta, 9 a.m. Good work." He pulled up his trucking company's GPS tracking app. It showed his Kenworth exactly where the 911 operator had said. Now approaching Baton Rouge, making perfect time, no detours, no stops since Brownsville. James never found out what happened during the 40 minutes he spent at the truck stop that didn't exist. His truck delivered the seafood to Atlanta on time. When he inspected it later, everything was exactly as it should be. The fuel tank showed he'd filled up somewhere, though his credit card had no record of the transaction. His dashcam footage showed him driving normally through Louisiana with no stops. He still drives, but he won't fuel in Louisiana anymore. Takes the long way around, even if it means expensive diesel prices in Texas or Mississippi. And sometimes, late at night, when he's exhausted and looking for a place to rest, he sees truck stops that look too empty, too quiet, too wrong. He drives past them, no matter how tired he is, because he knows that some stops, once you pull in, you might not be the one who drives away. Story 4. The Ambulance That Followed. Diana Reeves was a traveling nurse, a profession that kept her on the road constantly. At 39, she'd worked in hospitals across 12 states, taking short-term contracts that paid well and allowed her to see the country. She drove a well-maintained 2018 Toyota RAV4, had AILA premium membership, and always kept her phone charged and her gas tank above half full. She was cautious, organized, and in 15 years of driving long distances alone, she'd never had anything more serious than a flat tire. The night of January 16, 2022, Diana was driving from Nashville to Memphis, a straightforward 3-hour trip on Interstate 40. Her contract at Vanderbilt University Medical Center had ended that afternoon, and she was scheduled to start a new position at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis the next morning. She'd left Nashville at 7 p.m., expecting to arrive by 10, get a good night's sleep, and start her new job fresh. The drive started normally. Traffic was moderate, weather clear but cold, temperature hovering just above freezing. Diana had the radio on, switching between stations as she drove west, singing along with songs she recognized. She passed through the suburbs, then into the more rural stretches of the interstate between Nashville and Jackson. At mile marker 108, she first noticed the ambulance. It appeared in her rearview mirror, lights off, maintaining a steady distance about 100 yards behind her. At first, Diana didn't think much of it. Ambulances drove on highways like any other vehicle when they weren't responding to emergencies. But as minutes passed, and the ambulance remained exactly the same distance behind her, never attempting to pass, never falling further back, she began to feel uneasy. She changed lanes. The ambulance changed lanes, matching her movement precisely. She moved back to the right lane. The ambulance did the same. Diana accelerated to 75, watching her speedometer carefully. The ambulance maintained its distance perfectly, speeding up to match her pace. She slowed to 60. The ambulance slowed accordingly. A cold feeling crept up Diana's spine. This wasn't normal driving behavior. Someone was deliberately following her, matching her every movement. She grabbed her phone and checked the time. 8:23 p.m. Still plenty of traffic on the highway, other cars passing in both directions. She wasn't alone out here. Nothing to worry about, she told herself. But the ambulance stayed behind her, patient and persistent. Diana took the next exit, a small town called Jackson, just to see what would happen. The ambulance took the same exit, maintaining its distance. She drove through the town, randomly turning left, then right, then left again. The ambulance followed every turn, never getting closer, never falling back. She circled back to the interstate on-ramp and merged back onto I-40. The ambulance followed. Now Diana was frightened. She called 911, keeping her eyes on the road and the ambulance behind her. 911, what's your emergency? I'm being followed. I'm on Interstate 40 westbound, just past Jackson. There's an ambulance that's been following me for the last 20 minutes, matching my speed, copying my movements. An ambulance? Is it emergency vehicle with lights activated? No lights, no sirens. It's just following me. I've tried changing lanes, taking exits, everything. It stays exactly the same distance behind me. There was a pause. Diana heard keyboard typing. Ma'am, can you read me the unit number on the ambulance? Should be on the front or side. Diana glanced in her rearview mirror, trying to make out details. It's too far back. I can't see any markings clearly. Can you describe the vehicle? It's white, looks like a standard ambulance, box style. I can't see much more detail. All right, ma'am. I'm going to dispatch a highway patrol unit to your location. Stay on the line with me. What mile marker are you approaching? Diana checked the signs. Mile marker 95. Okay. Unit should reach you in about 8 minutes. Meanwhile, I want you to drive normally. Don't try to outrun it or take any more exits. Just maintain your speed on the interstate. Should I pull over? No. Stay on the highway, with other traffic around you. Do not stop until the patrol unit is with you. Diana continued driving, her hands gripping the wheel tightly. The ambulance maintained its position. 8 minutes felt like an hour. Finally, she saw flashing lights in the distance ahead. A Tennessee highway patrol car was on the shoulder, and as Diana approached, it pulled onto the highway behind her. The patrol car accelerated, moving up behind the ambulance. Diana watched in her mirrors, expecting the ambulance to pull over, to react somehow to the police presence. Instead, the ambulance simply changed lanes, moved past Diana on her left, and continued down the highway, maintaining a steady speed. As it passed, Diana got her first clear look at it in her headlights. It was definitely an ambulance, white and boxy, but there was something wrong with it. The vehicle looked old, much older than modern ambulances. The paint was faded, and there were no company markings, no hospital affiliation, no phone numbers. The windows were dark, and Diana couldn't see anyone inside. And on the back door, where there should have been a red cross or medical symbol, there was nothing. Just blank white metal. The patrol car pulled up alongside Diana and motioned for her to follow him to the shoulder. She did, pulling over carefully, her emergency flashers on. The officer approached her window, his flashlight scanning her vehicle. You the one who called about the ambulance? Yes, sir. Did you see it? It just passed me. The officer's expression was puzzled. Ma'am, I didn't see any ambulance. I pulled onto the highway behind you, and there was no vehicle between us. It was right there, Diana insisted. Right between us. You must have seen it. White ambulance. It moved into the left lane and passed me just as you were approaching. The officer shook his head slowly. There was nothing between us, ma'am. I had a clear view of your vehicle the whole time. But that's impossible. I watched it pass me. It went right by my window. The officer studied her carefully, his flashlight playing across her face. Diana realized he was checking to see if she was impaired. "Have you been drinking tonight, ma'am? Using any substances?" "No. I'm a nurse. I'm completely sober. There was an ambulance following me for 30 minutes. I'm not making this up." The officer asked for her license and registration, standard procedure. While he ran her information, Diana sat in her car, shaking. This didn't make sense. She'd seen the ambulance. The 911 operator had heard her describe it. It had been right there. The officer returned after a few minutes. "Everything checks out clean. Look, you seem like you're genuinely upset. Is it possible you saw headlights in your mirror and your mind filled in details that weren't there? It happens when people are tired or stressed." "I'm not tired. I know what I saw." He handed back her documents. "I'm going to follow you for the next 20 miles or so. Make sure everything's okay. If you see anything unusual, just wave out your window, and I'll pull you over again." Diana agreed, grateful for the escort. She pulled back onto the highway, the patrol car following close behind. For the next 15 miles, everything was fine. Normal traffic, normal conditions. Diana started to relax slightly, thinking maybe the officer's presence had scared off whoever was in the ambulance. Then she saw it again. Not behind her this time. Ahead of her, pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. The same white ambulance, sitting motionless on the side of the highway. Diana slowed automatically, and so did the patrol car behind her. As they approached the ambulance, Diana could see that the back doors were open. Someone was moving around inside, barely visible in the darkness. She glanced at her rearview mirror to see the officer's reaction. He was driving normally, not reacting to the ambulance at all. He wasn't slowing down further, wasn't reaching for his radio, wasn't doing anything to indicate he saw a potentially distressed vehicle on the shoulder. As Diana's RAV4 drew even with the ambulance, the figure inside turned to look at her. It was a paramedic in a dark blue uniform, or something wearing a paramedic's uniform. But the face was wrong, too pale, eyes too large. And it was smiling at her, a wide smile that showed too many teeth. The figure raised one hand in a wave as Diana passed. A slow, deliberate wave, like it was greeting an old friend. Diana accelerated, her heart pounding. She looked in her side mirror, watching the ambulance recede behind her. The patrol car passed it without slowing, without any indication he'd seen it at all. The ambulance's back doors closed, and the vehicle pulled onto the highway, once again positioning itself exactly 100 yards back, this time behind the patrol car. Diana grabbed her phone and called 911 again. The same operator answered. "It's back," Diana said without preamble. "The ambulance, it's behind me again. It was pulled over on the shoulder, and now it's following again." "Ma'am, the officer radioed in that everything seemed fine. Ask him to look behind him. It's right there. White ambulance, 100 yards back." Diana heard radio chatter in the background. The operator came back on. "Ma'am, the officer reports there's no ambulance, just normal traffic." "No, it's right there. I'm looking at it right now in my mirror." "Ma'am, I need you to calm down. The officer is going to pull you over again." The patrol car's lights came on, and Diana pulled over, fighting back tears of frustration. The ambulance pulled over behind the patrol car, maintaining that same precise distance. The officer approached Diana's window again, his expression now more concerned than skeptical. "Ma'am, I think you should follow me to the next exit. There's a hospital in Camden. I think you might need to get checked out." I'm not crazy, Diana said. I'm a nurse. I know when I'm seeing things that aren't there, and this isn't that. Please, just look behind your car. Please. The officer sighed, but turned to look back at his patrol car. Diana watched his expression. She saw the exact moment he looked at where the ambulance sat, and saw absolutely no reaction cross his face. He turned back to her. There's nothing there. Diana looked in her mirror. The ambulance sat on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking, back doors still closed. As she watched, the driver's door opened. The paramedic with the too pale face and too wide smile stepped out. It started walking toward them, not hurrying, just walking with steady, measured steps. It's coming toward us, Diana whispered. The officer followed her gaze, looking directly at the approaching figure. Ma'am, there's nothing there. You're looking at empty road. The paramedic was 20 feet away, 15 feet, 10 feet. Diana could see details now that made her want to scream. Its uniform was old style, the kind used decades ago. Its name tag read Martin, but the letters seemed to shift and change as she looked at them, and its eyes, those huge eyes, were completely black. It walked right past the officer, who didn't react at all. It approached Diana's window and placed one hand on the glass. The fingers were too long, the nails too sharp. It tapped gently, 3 times. Time to go, it said. Its voice was like nothing Diana had ever heard, like multiple voices speaking in unison, some high, some low, all overlapping. Your ride is here, Diana screamed. She threw her car into drive and hit the gas, tires squealing as she pulled back onto the highway. Behind her, the officer shouted something, reaching for his radio. Diana didn't stop. She accelerated to 90, weaving through traffic, taking the first exit she saw. She drove through back roads, through small towns, turning randomly, not caring where she went as long as it was away from the interstate. Her phone rang constantly, the 911 operator, then the highway patrol, then numbers she didn't recognize. She didn't answer. Finally, when her gas gauge hit empty and she couldn't drive any further, she pulled into a 24-hour McDonald's parking lot in some small town she didn't know the name of. She sat there with her doors locked, engine running until the tank was truly empty and the car died. Then she sat in silence, watching her mirrors, waiting for the ambulance to appear. It never did. As the sun came up, Diana finally answered her phone. The highway patrol wanted to know where she was, if she was okay. She gave them her location, and they sent a local officer to check on her. She told him everything, expecting him not to believe her. But the officer, an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, just nodded. The ambulance, he said quietly. Yeah, we get reports about it. Not often, maybe once or twice a year. Started about 5 years ago. Always the same description. White ambulance, no markings, follows people on I-40. Some people see it for a few minutes, some for hours. Nobody else can see it, except the person it's following. What is it? Diana asked. The officer shook his head. Don't know. Could be some kind of hallucination, mass hysteria thing. But I've talked to enough people who've seen it to know they're not all crazy. You're lucky, though. Lucky? You're here. Not everyone who sees it ends up okay. We've had 3 fatalities in the last 5 years on that stretch of highway. Single car accidents, no apparent cause. All 3 reported seeing a white ambulance before they crashed. Diana never drove I-40 through Tennessee again. She gave up traveling nursing, took a permanent position in Nashville, stayed off highways at night. Sometimes she still sees ambulances and feels a spike of fear, before she confirms they're normal emergency vehicles with proper markings and visible crews. But she never forgot what the paramedic with the wrong face had said. "Your ride is here." She wonders sometimes if it's still out there, driving the dark stretches of Interstate 40, following someone else, waiting patiently for its passenger to finally get in. And she wonders what would have happened if she'd accepted that ride, where that ambulance would have taken her, what hospital waiting at the end of that journey would have received her. She's grateful she never found out. Story 5. The Hitchhiker Who Knew Everything. Thomas Brennan was a regional sales representative for a pharmaceutical company, driving between doctors' offices and hospitals across the Midwest. At 52, he'd accumulated over 1 million miles on company vehicles, earned safety awards, and navigated every kind of weather and road condition imaginable. He drove a 2019 Ford Fusion, listened to audiobooks and podcasts during his long drives, and had his routes timed down to the minute. On September 3, 2021, Thomas was driving from Des Moines to Sioux Falls for an early morning meeting with hospital administrators. He'd worked late in Des Moines and didn't leave until 11 p.m., planning to drive straight through and arrive around 1:30 a.m. He'd done it before. The route was simple. Take I-35 north to I-90, then west into South Dakota. 3 hours, mostly empty highway, no problem. The night was clear but moonless, making the rural stretches of highway especially dark. Thomas had his audiobook playing, some thriller about international espionage, and was making good time when he saw the hitchhiker on the side of the road at mile marker 67 on I-35. The figure stood on the shoulder, thumb out, illuminated by Thomas's headlights. It was a man, maybe mid-30s, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, carrying a small backpack. Nothing unusual about him except that he was hitchhiking at nearly midnight in the middle of nowhere. Thomas's initial instinct was to pass by. He had strict company policies against picking up passengers, but something made him slow down. Maybe it was the complete isolation of the location. The nearest town was miles away, and Thomas hadn't seen another car in over 10 minutes. If this guy was stuck out here, he could be waiting all night for help. Maybe it was the fact that the hitchhiker wasn't moving erratically or showing any signs of intoxication. He just stood there calmly, thumb out, waiting patiently. Against his better judgment, Thomas pulled onto the shoulder, about 20 yards past the hitchhiker. He watched in his rearview mirror as the man picked up his backpack and jogged toward the car. Thomas kept his doors locked and lowered the passenger window only a few inches. "Thanks for stopping," the hitchhiker said. His voice was pleasant, educated sounding. "I know it's late. My car broke down about 5 miles back. I've been walking for almost an hour. If you could just get me to the next town, I'd really appreciate it." Thomas studied him carefully. The man looked tired, but not desperate. Clean, well-groomed, no visible tattoos or prison ink. He could have been anyone, a teacher, an accountant, a salesman like Thomas himself. "Where are you headed?" Thomas asked. "North. Anywhere north of here is fine. I can figure out the rest once I get to a town with a tow truck service." Thomas made a decision he'd later question 1,000 times. He unlocked the doors. "Get in. I'm going as far as the I-90 junction. That'll get you to Osceola at least." "That's perfect. Thank you so much." The hitchhiker opened the door and slid into the passenger seat, setting his backpack on the floor between his feet. "I'm Daniel." "Thomas." They shook hands. Daniel's grip was firm, but not aggressive. He settled into the seat, fastened his seatbelt, and Thomas pulled back onto the highway. For the first few minutes, they rode in silence. Thomas turned down his audiobook, but didn't turn it off completely. Daniel looked out the window at the dark countryside passing by. Then he spoke. "You're worried you made a mistake picking me up." Thomas glanced over, surprised. "What?" "It's normal. You don't know me. It's late, isolated road. You're wondering if I'm dangerous." Daniel smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I'm not. I promise. I'm just a guy who had car trouble at the worst possible time. Company policy says I'm not supposed to pick up passengers. But you did anyway. That says something good about you. Most people would have driven right past." Daniel shifted in his seat, getting more comfortable. "You work in pharmaceutical sales, regional territory. You've been doing it for almost 9 years. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. "How did you know that?" Daniel gestured vaguely. "Sample case in the back seat. Sales awards hanging from your rearview mirror. Company logo on your briefcase. Not hard to figure out." That made sense. Thomas relaxed slightly. "You're observant. It's a useful skill." Daniel was quiet for a moment, then added, "You're heading to Sioux Falls for a meeting at 7:30 a.m. Presentation about a new medication for type 2 diabetes. You're nervous about it because the hospital network has been resistant to your company's products before." Thomas's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Okay, that's creepy. How could you possibly know that?" "Your presentation notes are on the tablet in your briefcase. I can see the edge of the screen from here. It's still on." Daniel pointed, and Thomas glanced back. His tablet was indeed visible, screen glowing faintly through the open briefcase. "You read that from over there in the dark?" "Good eyesight." Daniel smiled again. "Don't worry, I'm not trying to freak you out, just making conversation." But Thomas was unsettled now. Something about this felt wrong. The explanations made sense individually, but combined, they created a picture of someone who was too observant, too analytical, too knowledgeable about things he shouldn't be able to determine from casual observation. "So what do you do?" Thomas asked, trying to shift the conversation to neutral ground. "I travel. I meet people. I learn things." Daniel's tone was casual, but there was something underneath it that Thomas couldn't identify. "Right now, I'm between jobs, trying to figure out what comes next." "What kind of work did you used to do?" "Research, analysis, pattern recognition." Daniel turned to look at Thomas directly. "I was good at predicting outcomes, understanding consequences, seeing where decisions lead." "Like an analyst? Data scientist?" "Something like that." Daniel looked back out the window. "Take the next exit." "What? Why?" "There's nothing at the next exit. We're still 20 miles from Osceola. Trust me, take the next exit." "I thought you wanted to get to Osceola." "I do. But you need to take the next exit. There's going to be an accident up ahead. Semi-truck crosses the median at mile marker 78. Happens in about 4 minutes. You don't want to be there when it does." Thomas laughed, but it came out nervous and shaky. "How could you possibly know that?" "I just do. Take the exit, please." This was too much. Thomas didn't believe in psychics or fortune tellers or whatever Daniel was pretending to be. "Look, I appreciate that you're trying to help, or whatever this is, but I'm not taking random exits based on vague warnings about accidents that haven't happened." Daniel sighed. "Your wife's name is Jennifer. You've been married 23 years. 2 kids. Emma just started college at Iowa State, studying biochemistry. Connor is a junior in high school, plays varsity basketball. You're worried about him because his grades dropped last semester, and you think he's hanging out with the wrong crowd." Thomas nearly swerved off the road. How the hell do you know that? There's no way you could. Family photo on your phone. It's in the cup holder. The screen lit up a few minutes ago when you got a text message. I saw the names, made educated guesses about the details. Emma's college t-shirt in the photo had an Iowa State logo. Connor's holding a basketball. The rest is just logical deduction based on typical family concerns. That's not possible. You can't deduce all that from a photo. Why not? People carry their lives with them. You just have to know how to read the signs. Daniel's voice softened. Take the exit, Thomas. I'm trying to save your life. A green sign appeared in the headlights. Exit 72, Weldon, 1 mile. Thomas's mind raced. This was insane. He should pull over, tell this guy to get out, call the police. But another part of him, a part that had kept him alive and successful through years of late-night driving, was screaming at him that something was very wrong, and he needed to listen. If I take this exit, will you explain to me what's really going on? Yes. Thomas took the exit. The ramp curved away into darkness, leading to a small rural road. He followed it, not knowing where it went, just putting distance between himself and the interstate. They drove for 2 minutes in silence, then 3, then 4. At exactly 4 minutes after they'd left the interstate, Thomas saw lights in his rearview mirror. Flashing red and blue lights, lots of them. Emergency vehicles racing back toward the interstate. Daniel said quietly, "Stop the car." Thomas pulled over. Daniel took out his phone, a device Thomas hadn't noticed before, and opened what looked like a news app. He handed it to Thomas. The headline read, "Fatal Semi-Accident on I-35, Breaking News." The article, timestamp Ed, just 2 minutes ago, described a semi-truck that had crossed the median at mile marker 78, causing a multi-vehicle pileup. Multiple casualties. Highway closed. Investigation ongoing. Thomas stared at the screen, his hands shaking. This isn't possible. It's happening right now, about 2 miles behind us. If you'd stayed on the interstate, you would have been there. Your Ford Fusion would have been crushed between the semi and a pickup truck. Death would have been instantaneous. How did you know? Daniel took his phone back. I told you. Pattern recognition, predicting outcomes. I'm good at seeing where decisions lead. You're not human. I didn't say I wasn't human. Daniel's expression was unreadable. I'm just not limited the way most humans are. I see things, possibilities, probabilities, the branching paths of every decision. Tonight, when you slowed down to look at me on that shoulder, I saw 2 futures. In one, you kept driving and died at mile marker 78. In the other, you stopped and picked me up, and I got you off the highway before the accident. Why? Why would you save me? Because I can. Because occasionally, I'm in the right place to change an outcome. And because you're a good person, Thomas Brennan, you stopped to help a stranger, even though every logical voice in your head told you not to. That kind of compassion deserves to be rewarded. Thomas felt tears welling up. I don't understand any of this. You don't need to. Daniel opened the car door. You should wait here for about 30 minutes, then take Highway 69 north to I-90. It'll add about 40 minutes to your trip, but you'll get to Sioux Falls safely. Your meeting will go well, by the way. They'll sign a 3-year contract. Biggest sale of your career. Wait, where are you going? Daniel stood outside the car, backpack in hand. Someone else needs help tonight. Different road, different outcome to change. That's what I do. Walk the highways, catch rides from good people, and occasionally nudge reality in a better direction. Will I see you again? Probably not. But but you'll think about this night for the rest of your life. You'll wonder if I was real, if any of it really happened, or if you just got lucky and avoided that accident through coincidence. You'll never be completely sure." Daniel smiled, and for the first time, it was a genuine smile. "That uncertainty will make you more careful, more grateful, more aware of how fragile and precious life is. So in a way, I'll always be with you." He closed the door and walked away into the darkness. Thomas sat there, stunned, watching the figure disappear. He counted to 30, then got out of the car and looked around. Nothing. No hitchhiker, no sign anyone had been there at all. He checked his passenger seat. No footprints on the floor mat. No depression in the seat cushion. Nothing to indicate someone had been sitting there for the last 15 minutes. Thomas pulled out his phone and searched for news about the accident. Multiple sources confirmed it. Major pileup on I-35 at mile marker 78. Multiple fatalities. Highway closed indefinitely. The timing matched Daniel's prediction exactly. He waited the full 30 minutes, his mind churning through everything that had happened, trying to find a rational explanation and failing. Then he got back on the road, taking Highway 69 as instructed, and drove to Sioux Falls in a daze. The meeting did go well. The hospital network signed a 3-year contract, the biggest sale of Thomas's career, exactly as Daniel had predicted. But Thomas could barely focus on his success. His mind kept returning to that impossible hitchhiker who knew things he shouldn't, who predicted an accident before it happened, who vanished without a trace. Thomas still drives for work, still covers his territory, still takes those late-night routes between cities. But he's different now, more careful, more aware, more grateful for every safe mile. And sometimes, late at night on empty highways, he slows down when he sees hitchhikers on the shoulder. He doesn't usually stop. That night taught him that some encounters are meant to be once in a lifetime. But he always looks carefully, wondering if one of those figures might be Daniel, moving through the darkness, catching rides from strangers, quietly changing outcomes and saving lives one driver at a time. And sometimes Thomas wonders about the other version of himself, the one who didn't slow down that night, who didn't pick up the hitchhiker, who kept driving toward mile marker 78. He wonders if that version of himself exists somewhere, in some other probability, some other branch of reality. And he's grateful beyond words that he lives in this version, where he made the decision to help a stranger and was saved by whatever Daniel really was. Story 6. The Rest. Stop that repeated. Catherine Walsh drove a passenger van for a senior living facility in Portland, Oregon, transporting residents to medical appointments, shopping trips, and social events. At 41, she'd been doing this work for 6 years and had accumulated thousands of hours behind the wheel. She was patient, reliable, and known for her gentle handling of elderly passengers who often felt nervous in vehicles. On April 27, 2023, Catherine had an unusual assignment. She needed to pick up a new resident, Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, from her previous residence in Eugene, Oregon, and drive her to Portland. It was a longer drive than usual, about 2 hours, but straightforward. Take Interstate 5 north, avoid traffic, arrive by early afternoon. Simple. Catherine left Portland at 8 a.m. in the facility's 2020 Dodge Grand Caravan, empty except for herself. The weather was typical for late April in Oregon. Overcast, cool, threatening rain, but not yet delivering it. She made good time, arriving in Eugene by 10:15. Mrs. Hartwell was ready and waiting, a small, neat woman in her 80s with white hair and sharp blue eyes. Her belongings had already been moved by a separate service. Catherine just needed to transport the woman herself. "I don't care much for highway driving," Mrs. Hartwell said, as Catherine helped her into the passenger seat. "All that speed makes me nervous." "I'm a very safe driver, Mrs. Hartwell. We'll take our time. No rushing." "Call me Eleanor. Mrs. Hartwell makes me sound ancient." Catherine smiled. "Eleanor it is." They left Eugene at 10:45, merging onto I-5 northbound. Traffic was light, and Catherine kept the van at a comfortable 65 miles per hour. Eleanor spent the first 30 minutes telling stories about her late husband, her children who lived on the East Coast, and her decades working as a librarian. Catherine listened politely, occasionally asking questions, comfortable with the familiar rhythm of elderly conversation. At 11:25, Catherine pulled into a rest stop. "I need to use the facilities," she explained to Eleanor. "Would you like to stretch your legs?" "No, dear. I'll wait here. But don't be too long. I get anxious sitting alone." Catherine locked the van doors remotely and headed into the rest stop building. It was a typical interstate facility: restrooms, vending machines, tourist brochures, and a small map display showing local attractions. A few other travelers moved around, but the place wasn't crowded. Catherine used the restroom, washed her hands, and returned to the van within 5 minutes. Eleanor was exactly where Catherine had left her, looking slightly relieved when Catherine opened the driver's door. "That wasn't too long," the older woman said approvingly. They pulled back onto the highway. Catherine checked the time. 11:32 a.m. They were making excellent time. At this rate, they'd be in Portland well before the 1 p.m. arrival window. "I'm feeling a bit tired," Eleanor said about 10 minutes later. "Would you mind if I closed my eyes for a little while?" "Not at all. Rest as much as you like." Eleanor settled back in her seat and closed her eyes. Catherine continued driving, watching the familiar landscape of I-5 roll past. Forests, hills, occasional glimpses of the Willamette River. She'd driven this route hundreds of times. At 11:58, Catherine felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The rest stop ahead looked familiar. Exactly familiar. Same building, same parking lot layout, same location relative to the highway. But that was impossible. She'd just stopped at a rest area less than 40 minutes ago. They couldn't have circled back. She'd been driving north the entire time. But her GPS showed mile marker 251, the same marker she'd seen at the previous rest stop. Catherine felt her stomach drop. That wasn't possible. In 40 minutes of driving, she should have covered at least 40 miles. She should be at mile marker 285, or beyond. She glanced at Eleanor, who was sleeping peacefully. Catherine's hands tightened on the wheel. Something was wrong. Very wrong. But she didn't want to alarm her passenger. Maybe her GPS was glitching. Maybe she'd misread the mile marker. There were rational explanations. She continued driving, paying close attention to the mile markers now. 252, 253, 254. Everything counting up normally. But then she saw another rest stop ahead, and her heart began to pound. Same building, same layout, exactly the same. Catherine checked her GPS again. Mile marker 251. But she'd just passed 254. The numbers didn't make sense. Time showed 12:32 p.m. Over an hour had passed since the first rest stop, but according to the mile markers and GPS, she'd made no progress at all. Eleanor stirred. "Are we almost there?" "Not quite," Catherine said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Another 30 minutes or so." "Didn't we just pass a rest stop?" "Yes, a little while ago. I could have sworn I saw the same one twice." Eleanor's voice carried a note of confusion. "But that's silly. Old eyes playing tricks." Catherine said nothing. They weren't old eyes playing tricks. She'd seen it too. The same rest stop, 3 times now. But that violated every law of physics and geography, unless she'd somehow been driving in circles, which was impossible on a straight interstate highway. She decided to test something. At the next rest stop, and she knew there would be a next one, she would pull in. She would look for something specific, some detail she could verify the next time around, if there was a next time. The rest stop appeared at 12:47 p.m. Catherine pulled in, much to Eleanor's confusion. "I thought you just stopped," the older woman said. "I need to check something." Catherine got out and walked into the rest stop building. She went directly to the tourist brochure display and took a map of Oregon, making a mental note of its position in the rack. Then she went to the vending machine and noticed it had a row of Snickers bars in slot D4. She counted them, 7 bars. She took a photo with her phone. She noticed a piece of gum stuck to the floor near the women's restroom. She photographed that too. Back in the van, Eleanor looked worried. "Catherine, dear, are you feeling all right? You seem distracted." "I'm fine. Just needed to check on something." They pulled back onto the highway. Catherine drove at exactly 65 miles per hour, watching her odometer carefully. The tenths clicked over steadily. 0.01 miles, 0.02 miles, 0.03 miles. The van was definitely moving forward, but the mile markers told a different story. 252, 253, 254, then impossibly back to 251. The rest stop appeared again at 1:15 p.m. Catherine pulled in without hesitation this time. Eleanor didn't comment, and Catherine realized the older woman's eyes had a glassy, distant look. She wasn't fully aware of what was happening. Maybe that was a mercy. Catherine ran into the rest stop building. The Oregon map was in the exact same position in the rack. The vending machine had 7 Snickers bars in slot D4. The piece of gum was stuck to the floor in the same spot. She checked her phone. The photos she'd taken earlier were still there. Timestamps showing they'd been taken 28 minutes ago. But the scene was identical, down to the smallest detail. She approached another traveler, a man in his 30s getting coffee from a machine. "Excuse me, have you been here before? Earlier today?" The man gave her a strange look. "Just pulled in. Why? Have you noticed anything unusual about this place?" "Lady, it's a rest stop. They're all the same." He took his coffee and walked away quickly, clearly thinking she was unhinged. Catherine went back to the van. Eleanor was fully asleep now, her breathing slow and regular. Catherine sat in the driver's seat, hands shaking, trying to think. This was impossible, but it was happening. She was caught in some kind of loop, driving the same stretch of highway over and over, stopping at the same rest area repeatedly. Time was moving forward. Her watch confirmed that, but space was repeating. She pulled out her phone to call her supervisor, explain that she'd be late, that something impossible was happening. No signal, no bars at all, even though this stretch of I-5 usually had decent coverage. She tried anyway, but the call wouldn't connect. There had to be a way out, some way to break the loop. Catherine started the van and pulled back onto the highway, but this time she did something different. Instead of continuing north, she took the next exit, leading into a small town called Halsey. The exit ramp curved away from the interstate, and Catherine followed it hopefully. But as she reached the stop sign at the end of the ramp, the road ahead simply ended. Not in construction or a barricade. It just ended, fading into a gray nothingness, like fog, but thicker, more solid. Catherine stopped the van, staring at the impossible sight. She put the van in reverse and backed up. When she turned around, the interstate was gone. The on-ramp she'd just descended wasn't there. Instead, there was only that same gray nothingness, pressing in from all sides. leaving only a small bubble of real space around her van. Eleanor woke up, looking around in confusion. "Where are we?" "I don't know," Catherine admitted. "This doesn't look like Portland." "It's not." The grey fog began to recede, and suddenly they were back on the interstate, moving at 65 miles per hour, as if they'd never left. Catherine's hands were on the wheel, though she didn't remember putting them there. The mile marker passing by read 2:43. Catherine felt tears of frustration welling up. There was no way out. No exit ramps, no emergency stops, no pulling over. Just the same stretch of highway, the same rest stop, over and over. She looked at Eleanor, who had that glassy look again, staring straight ahead, without seeing. "I'm sorry," Catherine whispered. "I don't know how to get us out of this." The rest stop appeared again. Catherine pulled in mechanically. 1:43 p.m. She didn't bother checking the details this time. She knew they'd be identical. She sat in the parking spot, engine idling, trying to think of anything she hadn't tried. A tapping on her window made her jump. A woman stood outside, maybe in her 60s, wearing a highway patrol uniform. But something was off about the uniform. It looked dated, the style from decades ago. The woman motioned for Catherine to roll down her window. "You're stuck," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. How do you know?" "Because I was stuck too. For a while. Years, maybe. It's hard to tell. Time gets strange in the loop." Catherine felt a surge of hope. "How did you get out?" The woman smiled sadly. "I didn't. I stopped trying. Eventually, you become part of it. You become part of the rest stop, one of the ghosts who exist in between the repetitions. But I can help you. If you want out, really want out, there's only one way. Tell me. Stop fighting it. Accept it. Let the loop take you completely. And when you feel yourself fading, when you feel yourself becoming part of the repetition, think of where you want to be. Focus on it with everything you have. The loop feeds on resistance. It keeps you here because you keep trying to escape. But if you surrender, if you let go, sometimes it releases you." "That doesn't make sense." "Nothing about this makes sense. But it's the only way I know." The woman stepped back from the van. "Decide quickly. Each repetition makes it harder. Eventually you won't remember there's anything but the loop." The woman walked away, and Catherine watched her disappear into the rest stop building. Or maybe she just faded away. Catherine couldn't be sure. Eleanor spoke, her voice stronger than it had been in hours. "I think you should listen to her." Catherine turned, surprised. Eleanor's eyes were clear now, focused and aware. "You know what's happening." "I've been aware for the last few loops. I was pretending to sleep because I didn't know what else to do. But that woman is right. I can feel it. The more you fight, the tighter this trap becomes." Catherine looked at the rest stop, at the highway, at the grey sky above. She thought about Portland, about the senior facility, about her normal life. She wanted to get back to it desperately. But wanting wasn't enough. Fighting wasn't enough. She took a deep breath. "Okay, I'll try." She put the van in drive and pulled back onto the highway. Mile marker 251 approached, then 252, then 253. She felt the loop beginning again, felt the subtle shift as they approached the point where everything would reset. And instead of tensing up, instead of fighting it, Catherine let go. She stopped trying to understand it, stopped trying to find the logic, stopped resisting. She closed her eyes and thought of Portland, the senior facility, the driveway where she always parked, the front desk where she'd sign Eleanor in. She thought of it with perfect clarity. accepting that maybe she'd never get there, surrendering to whatever force had trapped them. The van shook slightly. Catherine felt a sensation like falling, though they were still moving forward on a flat highway. Eleanor gasped. Catherine opened her eyes. They were on I-5, approaching Wilsonville, 20 miles south of Portland. The GPS showed mile marker 283. The time was 12:47 p.m., the same time they'd entered the third loop. But the date on her phone's display was still April 27th. They'd lost no time. Or they'd lost hours and somehow gotten them back. Catherine didn't know and decided she didn't care. "Are we?" Eleanor began. "Yes," Catherine said, her voice shaking. "We're out." They drove the rest of the way to Portland in silence. Catherine pulled into the senior facility at exactly 1:15 p.m. within their arrival window, as if nothing unusual had happened. Eleanor's paperwork showed she'd been picked up from Eugene at 10:45, exactly as scheduled. The drive had taken 2.5 hours, perfectly normal for the distance. But Catherine's hands shook as she helped Eleanor out of the van, and Eleanor squeezed her arm with surprising strength. "We won't talk about what happened," the older woman said quietly. "No one would believe us anyway. But thank you for getting us out. I think you helped as much as I did. Perhaps we helped each other." Eleanor smiled. "Either way, I'm glad my first day at the new home is also the day I arrived alive." Catherine completed her paperwork, parked the van, and went home early, telling her supervisor she wasn't feeling well. She wasn't lying. She felt shaken, disoriented, unsure of reality. She spent the evening researching loops, time anomalies, strange highway phenomena. She found dozens of stories similar to hers. Drivers who found themselves repeating the same stretch of road, unable to escape, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for what felt like days. Some of the stories had happy endings, like hers. Others didn't. Some drivers were never heard from again. Their vehicles found abandoned at rest stops, no sign of the occupants. Some were found confused and disoriented, unable to explain where they'd been or how much time had passed. Catherine still drives for the senior facility, but she's changed her routes. She avoids I-5 between Eugene and Portland now, takes the longer Highway 99 route instead, even though it adds 30 minutes. She doesn't stop at rest areas unless absolutely necessary, and she never stops at the same one twice in one day. And sometimes, late at night, she thinks about that highway patrol officer who'd spoken to her, who'd claimed to be stuck in the loop for years, who'd showed her the way out. Catherine wonders if the woman is still there, trapped in those endless repetitions, watching an infinite series of drivers pull in and out of that rest stop, occasionally helping someone escape, but never escaping herself. Catherine hopes not. She hopes the woman found her own way out eventually. But she suspects the truth is darker, that some people who enter the loop never leave, that they become permanent residents of that impossible space, existing in the gaps between 1 mile marker and the next, one moment and the next, one version of reality and another. And Catherine is grateful, more grateful than she can express, that she isn't one of them. Story 7. The Convoy of Silent Trucks. Derek Sullivan had been an over-the-road trucker for 26 years, starting when he was 22 and never looking back. At 48, he owned his own rig, a pristine 2021 Freightliner Cascadia, and ran routes all over the continental United States. He specialized in high-value electronics shipments, requiring strict delivery windows and extensive security protocols. His reputation was spotless, never late, never damaged cargo. Never a single insurance claim in over 2 decades. The night of August 15th, 2022, Derek was hauling a load of servers and computer equipment from San Jose, California, to Dallas, Texas. The cargo was worth over $3 million, and his contract included specific route requirements and check-in protocols. He'd left San Jose at 2 p.m., planning to drive through the night across Nevada and into Arizona before taking his mandatory rest break. By 10 p.m., Derek was crossing Nevada on Interstate 80, a desolate stretch of highway he'd traveled hundreds of times. The night was clear, temperature still in the 80s even after sunset, and traffic was sparse. Derek had his CB radio on, listening to the occasional chatter from other drivers, mostly complaints about construction delays near Reno and weather reports for points east. At mile marker 173, Derek noticed the first truck. It was a Peterbilt 389, pulling a standard dry van trailer, traveling in the right lane at about 65 miles per hour. Nothing unusual about it, except that it had no lights. Not just running with parking lights like some drivers did on empty highways to save the battery. No lights at all. The running lights were dark, the trailer marker lights were dark, and even the license plate light was out. Derek frowned. That was dangerous and illegal. He moved to the left lane to pass, and as he came alongside the Peterbilt, he glanced over at the cab. The driver's window was dark, and Derek couldn't see anyone inside. He assumed the driver was running without cab lights to preserve night vision, something Derek did himself sometimes. He passed the dark Peterbilt and moved back to the right lane. His CB crackled with static, but no voices came through. Derek adjusted the squelch, trying to clear the interference. Nothing changed, just static. 2 minutes later, Derek saw another truck ahead, another semi, this one a Kenworth T680, also pulling a dry van, also running completely dark. No lights whatsoever. It traveled at exactly the same speed as the first truck had been going. Derek slowed slightly, letting the dark Kenworth maintain its distance ahead of him. Something felt wrong. One truck with electrical problems was one thing. 2 trucks, different makes, both running completely dark on the same stretch of highway. That was too much of a coincidence. He picked up his CB microphone. This is Freight Runner eastbound at mile 175 on I-80. Anyone else seeing trucks with no lights out here? Static answered him. Derek tried again on different channels. More static. His CB had been working fine 20 minutes ago. Now it was completely jammed with interference. A third truck appeared ahead, materializing out of the darkness like it had just spawned there. A Volvo VNL, dry van trailer, no lights. It merged onto the highway from an on-ramp, even though Derek hadn't seen any signs indicating an entrance. The dark truck merged smoothly and settled into the right lane at exactly 65 miles per hour. Derek's unease blossomed into genuine fear. This wasn't normal. This wasn't possible. He grabbed his cell phone to call dispatch, report what he was seeing, get advice on what to do. His phone showed no signal, which was unusual but not unheard of in rural Nevada. But when he tried to access his GPS app, it wouldn't load. The screen froze, then went black. The fourth truck appeared, an International Lone Star, dry van, no lights, same exact speed. Derek realized with a creeping dread that they were forming a convoy. The trucks were positioning themselves in a line, evenly spaced, all traveling at precisely the same rate, and he was in the middle of them, with dark trucks ahead and behind. He checked his mirrors. The first Peterbilt had caught up to him and was now following, about 100 yards back. Through his side mirror, Derek could see a 5th truck behind the Peterbilt, and a 6th behind that. All dark, all silent, all maintaining perfect spacing. Derek pressed his accelerator, pushing his freightliner up to 70, then 75. The trucks ahead maintained their distance perfectly, somehow accelerating without appearing to speed up. The trucks behind did the same, staying exactly 100 yards back, no matter how fast Derek went. He tried slowing down. 60 miles per hour. 55. 50. The convoy adjusted around him, the trucks ahead slowing to match his pace, the trucks behind maintaining their distance with mathematical precision. It was like they were all connected, all following some programmed instruction he couldn't see. Derek's engine temperature gauge caught his eye. It was rising, creeping toward the red zone, even though he wasn't pulling any significant grade and the night air was cool. His oil pressure was fluctuating. His fuel gauge was dropping faster than it should. Everything about his truck's performance was starting to go wrong simultaneously. The convoy now numbered at least 20 trucks. Derek counted them in his mirrors and through his windshield. Dark shapes on a dark highway, visible only because they blocked the stars. Silent and lightless and impossible. And all of them were closing in, the spacing between vehicles gradually decreasing. Derek saw an exit ahead. Battle Mountain. 3 miles. He knew that exit, knew there was a truck stop there, knew there would be people and lights and safety. He moved to the right lane, preparing to take the exit, and the trucks around him moved as well, boxing him in. The Kenworth ahead was now only 50 yards in front. The Peterbilt behind had closed to 50 yards as well. On his left, parallel to his driver's door, a Mack Anthem had appeared, matching his speed exactly. The space around Derek's freightliner was shrinking. His engine temperature hit the red zone. Warning lights began illuminating across his dashboard. Check engine, low oil pressure, high coolant temperature, battery voltage. Every system in his truck was failing at once, which was impossible. Derek had maintained this rig meticulously. There was no way everything would break simultaneously. The exit 1 mile sign appeared, and Derek made a decision. He wasn't going to let these things, and he was sure now that they weren't normal trucks, weren't driven by people, weren't bound by regular physics, box him in. He jerked his wheel to the right, forcing his way between the Kenworth ahead and the space on the shoulder, his trailer swinging slightly with the sudden movement. The dark trucks responded instantly. The Kenworth ahead accelerated, closing the gap. The Mack on his left moved right, its trailer nearly scraping Derek's cab. The Peterbilt behind accelerated, coming within 20 yards. They were herding him, forcing him away from the exit, keeping him in the convoy. Derek fought back. He downshifted, his engine roaring in protest, and punched the accelerator. His freightliner had a powerful engine, and he used every bit of it, pulling ahead of the Kenworth, cutting right across its path toward the exit ramp. His trailer swung wide, and he felt the terrible possibility of jackknifing. But he didn't care. He had to get off this highway. His front wheels hit the exit ramp, and everything changed. The dark trucks vanished, not gradually, not pulling away. They just stopped existing. 1 second, Derek was surrounded by 20 silent, lightless semis, and the next second the highway behind him was empty. His mirrors showed nothing but dark asphalt and the distant glow of some town's lights. Derek's truck coasted down the exit ramp, all his warning lights still blazing. He rolled into the parking lot of a Battle Mountain truck stop on momentum alone, his engine dying as he reached a parking spot. He sat in the cab, breathing hard, his whole body shaking. Other trucks sat in the parking lot, their markers' lights glowing normally, their cabs occupied by normal drivers doing normal things. Derek could see people moving around through windshields, could hear the rumble of idling engines, could see the bright lights of the truck stop building. Everything was blessedly, perfectly normal. He climbed down from his cab and popped the hood, expecting to find catastrophic failure in every system. But when he looked, everything appeared fine. No leaks, no loose connections, no obvious damage. He checked his oil. Perfect level, clean and amber. He checked his coolant, full and clean. He checked every warning light's corresponding system and found nothing wrong. His CB radio crackled to life. Reno, weather looks good all the way through. Anyone know if the Flying J in Winnemucca has showers available? Normal chatter. Normal voices. Derek grabbed the microphone. This is Freight Runner. I'm at Battle Mountain. Did anyone see a convoy of dark trucks on I-80 westbound? No lights, running silent. Negative, Freight Runner. Haven't seen anything like that. Nobody's running dark out here, friend. DOT would have their ass. You feeling okay, driver? Derek didn't respond. He put down the microphone and pulled out his phone. Full signal. He called his dispatcher, told her he was taking an emergency break, that his truck had experienced some warning lights, but everything checked out okay now. He didn't mention the convoy. What would he say? He'd been followed by 20 ghost trucks. She'd make him take a drug test. He went into the truck stop, got coffee, sat at the counter, and talked to other drivers. Normal conversation about fuel prices, traffic conditions, weather. He asked casually if anyone had experienced anything weird on I-80 lately. Most people laughed it off. But one old driver, a man who looked to be in his 70s, got quiet. Dark trucks? The old man asked. Yeah, convoy of them. No, lights, running silent. The old driver nodded slowly. I've heard about those. Heard stories for years, from drivers who run Nevada and Arizona routes. They show up sometimes on long, empty stretches. No explanation for what they are or what they want. Some people think they're ghosts, trucks that crashed and their spirits keep driving. Some think they're some kind of military experiment, autonomous vehicles being tested. Some think they're something worse. Worse how? You know how sometimes animals will sense danger before a big accident? Dogs that won't cross a bridge that collapses an hour later. Horses that refuse to enter a barn that catches fire. Some people think the dark trucks are like that. Harbingers. They show up before something bad is going to happen on that stretch of road. And anyone who sees them, anyone who doesn't get away from them, ends up part of whatever disaster is coming. That's superstition. Maybe. But 3 years ago, a driver named Thompson reported seeing a convoy of dark trucks near Elko. He didn't get off the highway, just pushed through them. Next morning, they found his rig at the bottom of a ravine. Highway patrol said he must have fallen asleep, gone off the road. But Thompson had 30 years of clean driving. Never had an accident, never had a violation. And I knew him. He was the most careful driver I ever met. He didn't fall asleep. Derek felt cold despite the warm coffee in his hands. What are you saying? I'm saying you did the right thing getting off the highway. I'm saying maybe take a different route to Dallas. And I'm saying don't go back out there tonight. Wait until morning. Derek took the advice. He slept in his cab, or tried to sleep. Mostly he lay awake, listening to the normal sounds of the truck stop, reassuring himself that he was back in the real world. When dawn came, he checked his systems again, found everything still functioning perfectly, despite the previous night's warning light festival, and got back on the road. He didn't take I-80. He went south, took Highway 50 across Nevada, then down to Interstate 40 through Arizona. It added 6 hours to his trip, made him late for his delivery window for the first time in his career, cost him a penalty fee. He didn't care. He wasn't going back to that stretch of highway where the dark convoy had surrounded him. Derek never found out if something bad happened on I-80 that night. He didn't want to know. He changed his routes permanently, avoiding certain stretches of Nevada and Arizona highways, especially at night. Other drivers thought he'd gone soft, lost his nerve. His dispatcher questioned why he was taking longer routes for no apparent reason. He couldn't explain without sounding crazy. But sometimes, late at night, when he's on a dark highway somewhere, Derek sees trucks in his mirrors, and his heart races until he confirms they have lights, that they're normal rigs driven by normal people. And he thinks about that convoy, those 20 silent trucks that had surrounded him, that had tried to keep him from leaving. He thinks about what the old driver said, about harbingers and disasters and drivers who didn't escape. And he wonders how many trucks are out there in the darkness, running without lights, crewed by nothing human, following their own inexplicable routes and purposes. He wonders if they're still on I-80 near Battle Mountain, or if they've moved to other highways, other states, waiting for their next encounter with a driver who doesn't know to escape while there's still time. Derek still drives, still hauls valuable cargo across America's highways. But he's more careful now, more aware. He listens to stories from other drivers that he would have dismissed before. He pays attention to warnings that seem irrational. And when his CB radio fills with static for no reason, when his phone loses signal on a highway that should have coverage, when he sees trucks ahead running without lights, he doesn't hesitate anymore. He takes the next exit. Every single time, no matter what, because he knows that some convoys, once you join them, don't let you leave. And some deliveries, no matter how valuable the cargo, aren't worth making if the road leads somewhere that has no return.